Hello everyone, I'm Katra. I've been playing Genshin since day one, and a few months ago, after being disappointed with the first Not Cry livestream and the anniversary rewards, I decided to try out Wuthering Waves. I've now completed every single story quest, character quest, and exploration quest up to version 2.7. I've also played through a couple of side quests, but not that many, and I haven't reached the last stage of the endgame modes. But I don't really care too much about those, so I feel like I've played enough to be able to make a video about the game. I usually split every review into two videos, but for this one specifically I've ditched a format because it allows me to talk about both good and bad together, and it's necessary here. Also, the game isn't too big yet, so I think I can fit everything into one video without having it be too long. Two warnings: I'll talk about the entire game story, so there will be spoilers, and I'll inevitably compare the game to other gacha games. I try not to, but sometimes I can't avoid it. Anyway, without further ado, here's my full review of Wuthering Waves as of version 2.7. If you know me, you know that the aspect I care about the most in a video game is the story. And boy oh boy, is there a lot to talk about here, so buckle up. I will go through every single main quest in Rinascita individually and talk about it in depth. I'm not going to talk about any Huanglong quests, I don't want this video to be too long, and most players say that the real story starts in Rinascita anyway, which is a nice way to say that the story before then wasn't good. But before I delve into each quest, I'll first talk about a few aspects of the overall story that I like or dislike. Let's start with what I like, the first thing being that the game has a darker and more adult theme. I come from Genshin, and apart from a few world quests, I'd say the game feels like it's made for kids, or young teenagers at most. WuWa isn't Dark Souls, but when compared to Genshin it feels a lot more mature, which is what I personally prefer. You can try to argue that there's more deaths in Genshin or that the game hides its dark elements, but a lot of the time this comparison is not about what's actually there, but about how it feels. For example, Genshin's version 4.2 might actually be darker than a lot of WuWa quests, but it doesn't feel like it. A big reason why that's the case is in the art style, specifically in how the characters look. The average Genshin character looks a lot younger than the average WuWa character. Anyway, I don't think I need to drop more arguments here. You can just ask someone who doesn't play games which game they think looks more mature. That's the best way to confirm that what I'm saying is right. Before 2.7, I thought WuWa would suffer from an issue that's also present in Genshin. And it's that there's no main party of characters or place to call home. Honkai Star Rail has the Astral Express and the Nameless, but Genshin just has the Traveler, and they have no place to call home really. WuWa seem to be running into the same issue, but I'd say the return to the Black Shores in 2.7 fixes for me in a lot of ways. The fact that we returned to our base, that Alto came back with us, that the Black Shores helped us with the fight in Rinascita, and that Galbrena joins the Black Shores at the end of the quest, all helped with that feeling of having a main group of characters and not just a lone protagonist. It could have been a bit better if there were more characters to greet us when we returned to the Black Shores, or if we had more Black Shores members help us throughout Rinascita's story, but hey, I'm not going to complain too much. I was pretty happy with the whole ending of that quest, and I hope we get more of these moments that show Rover is not alone in the future. Now let's get into what I don't like overall, starting with how the female characters interact with Rover. I mentioned before that I enjoyed that the game feels more adult, but one downside of it is that it can be hard to tell when a character is just being nice to the Rover or flirting with them. I do believe the whole meme about gathering waves is exaggerated, but to be fair, I had to change my Rover from male to female before I had even finished the 1.0 story. I really did not like how Yang was blushing over a guy she met barely 3 hours ago in gameplay time after the Scar fight. And the fact that there's a huge lack of male characters in the game only helps worsen this issue. And it's weird because I also play Nike, but somehow I'm not bothered by this in that game. I think it's because in Nike they're very open about it, while here in WuWa it feels like they're trying to hide the fact that the game is very clearly catered towards males. I think they need to either tone it down or go all in. Sitting in the fence just makes both people who enjoy this and people who don't angry, so just pick a side and stay there. The next problem is that characters just do not interact with each other. Excluding the latest story quest, in every single previous quest characters would just avoid talking to each other, or the script would conveniently separate them, like what happened in 2.2 with Cantarella and Cartesia. I know that they did have a few dialogues together, but most of the quest was just Rover talking to each of them individually. It feels like characters are not allowed to talk unless it's directly to Rover, and it hurts the writing, a lot. I don't think I need to explain in too much detail why having characters interact with each other, even when the Rover isn't there, would be great. Through conversation, characters can evolve. They can show off more of their personality, and they can even become more complex if they speak differently depending on who they're talking to. It would have been nice seeing more of Carlotta and Zani together, or even Chacona with Brant and Rocha talking about music. They really need to start improving this because the situation is pretty bad. Even version 2.7, the quest with the most amount of these interactions, was severely lacking in them. It's crazy to me that Augusta and Galbrena barely talked to each other in that quest, and that she only recognized her almost at the end of the story. I really hope they keep this in mind when writing the story for the 3.x versions. Another issue, and one that seems to plague many gacha games and JRPGs nowadays, is that characters don't talk and act like real human beings. They behave like video game characters. It's hard to explain what the difference is. This is something you can't really understand unless you've seen examples of both. I think the best way I can put this is that the characters here seem limited to the constraints of their written personalities and traits. They are not allowed to deviate at all from those guidelines. Here's an example. Augusta is written as a warrior through and through, one who never falters. And in the quests, she's always like that, stoic and serious. but when in 2.7 she finally realizes who Brenner really is, I think it would have been way better if she broke free from those limits for a second and gave her a hug or something. She's supposed to be her childhood friend that she thought to be dead because of her, and all she does is say, "We'll catch up later?" I understand that the situation was dire, but come on, not even a hug or a single tear? I don't think that's very realistic. Another thing that helps with making characters feel more real is making them closer to your average person. I'd say the most realistic character in the game is Zanny. Even though she's still just like the rest, limited to asset personality, she feels way better written because she has a normal job and hobbies, ones that any average person would relate to. The way characters talk is also a factor, and Zanny's language is very casual, again helping with making her feel like a real human being instead of a character. Anyway, it's hard for me to pinpoint the problems here, but I hope you've gotten the gist of it. And this is an issue that makes it even worse in the next set of versions. Now that we know that the next region is a sort of semi-realistic, semi-futuristic area, if the characters don't feel human, it will be even more noticeable there. I really hope they can fix this issue before then. If you combine the previous two issues I mentioned, then the result is that I don't personally care for any of the characters in the story. And what ends up happening is that the game doesn't really deliver when it comes to emotional moments. I think the best one would be Frollowa's death, and even that one didn't really move me. The rest just fail completely, like Mia's whole story. I don't understand how they expect me to feel sad for the death of a character that has had less than 10 lines in the entire quest. Not to mention that she had no interactions with any of the cast, and even worse is that she didn't even really die. She was already dead to begin with. One thing in particular that really stops me from liking this is that you can tell how hard they're trying to make the players cry. The reason I like Frollowa's moment is because it is very short and unceremonious. She just quickly gets stabbed in the heart and falls into the water. And the farewell after that is also pretty short. They trusted that the emotions would reach the player without having to make it unnecessarily grandiose. Now compare that to Avidius' death, with a long dialogue before the fight. There's also a boss fight where he talks, the dialogue after, and they even threw in one last cutscene. You could tell that they were desperately trying to replicate their success with Frollowa, and once I can tell the writer's intentions, the emotions just don't come at all for me. I'm now going to go through every single version in Rinascita and tell you what's good and what's bad about them. I didn't do this for any of my other reviews, but I think it makes sense to do it here because, for one, I have a lot more criticisms about the story, and secondly, there's not that many versions, so I can do this without having the video stretch too long. Also, I'm not going to talk about the quest before Rinascita. I really don't think it's worth my time to talk about the Huanglong quests. They weren't good at all. And Shorekeeper's quest was just fine. I don't really have anything bad or good to say about it. It suffered from the same issue I mentioned before, it didn't really move me. So anyway, let's get into Rinascita's story, starting with version 2.0. This patch is a great introduction, maybe even one of the best introductions for a new region from the big gacha games. It showcases a lot of the characters, and the two that didn't appear, Cantarella and Chacona, had valid reasons to not appear in the story. It also does a great job of taking the player through the entire region. You don't just stay in the city for the entire quest. The characters you're interacting with and the areas you're in keep changing throughout the whole quest, and it makes the experience a lot better. And from the very moment you set foot in the new area, the main conflict of the story is revealed to the player. When you see the Order and the Pilgrim Sail, you understand that the themes here are going to be beliefs and religion, and it's all shown to the player in a way that's really easy to understand. If you're not too dumb, in that moment you also see who the main villain of the region is going to be. And that's the one thing I don't like about the quest, the Rover's actions. I feel like Rover should have immediately been wary of Cristoforo. I mean, come on, pretty much every other weird guy dressed in red they've seen has been part of the Fraxidos. And at the end of the quest, when they told to Fenrico, they should have been more aggressive or proactive. The Rover knows at that point that the Order is sending people to die with the pilgrimage, and he does not accuse Fenrico of it at all. But anyway, apart from this one mistake, the quest overall is very solid. It's not mind-blowing, but the first quest of a new region doesn't need to be incredible. It just needs to set everything up properly, and this one does it extremely well. One last thing, I really like that the quest doesn't end on a cliffhanger. Other gacha games tend to do this on their introductory patches, and I don't like it at all. Here, they managed to strike a happy medium by having a proper conclusion while leaving a few mysteries that the player can think about, those being Cartesia's role and the Fraxidos goals. So yeah, a pretty good start to Rinascita. Now let's continue with version 2.2. I'm sorry, but I don't understand why people love this quest so much. I don't like it at all. Let's start with the fact that about 75% of the quest is just filler gameplay through the new area, which is already pretty bad. Next, the quest focuses entirely on Cartesia, and I have to be honest here, I don't really like her as a character. During the entire quest, she's just a damsel in distress. I don't understand why they didn't let us play as her during the filler gameplay sections. It would have made those less bad, because at least you would be trying out a new character, and it would have made her look less helpless. Her backstory is supposed to be emotional and all, but like I said before, this game just fails pretty hard with emotional moments. Here it was particularly bad, because my brain cannot process those when it is thinking about something else, and I was fully focused on trying to make sense of her backstory, because it was explained in a pretty confusing way. Considering her character is split in half, and looking at the scene where she falls asleep on Rower's lap, I feel like they just stole a few concepts from Xenoblade 2 here. Except the story in that game is amazing, and this quest isn't. Also, let's not forget that that moment only happened because the writers made Cantarella leave the place, so the rover could have their certified Gathering Waves moment with Cartesia. And by the way, this quest is supposed to be the conclusion of Raguna's story, a conclusion where none of the other characters of the region show up, and one that's happening right after the introductory version. And what were supposed to be the main conflicts of the region, the order and the concept of belief, are just completely absent here. They are instead replaced by the Threnodian, which is a pretty awfully written villain. Their goals, motivations, and even their powers are all really dumb. I really feel like this was too rushed. There should have been another story quest between 2.0 and 2.2. Anyway, even though I'm being pretty critical here, not everything in the quest is bad. The final boss and the ending are obviously the highlights, and they're both pretty good. The ending I have issues with because even at the end I remain confused. You're not even sure if the Threnodian is dead or not. But the boss fight is great, no complaints there. I really appreciated the relative swap between the rover elements in the middle of combat, a really cool idea that I wish Genshin would learn from. Yet again, WuWa shines with her presentation and gameplay, while the writing is just mediocre, a theme that is common throughout the whole game. Anyway, let's now move on to Septimont with version 2.4. 2.2 was sort of confusing, but you could still understand what was happening most of the time. Here in version 2.4, I'm afraid that's not the case. This quest may very well be more confusing than the entirety of Penacone in Star Rail, and that's saying something. Throughout the entire quest, I never knew if what was happening was real or fake, if we were in the actual reality, or in a fake reality, or inside a Sonoro, and I would not be so harsh if at least by the end everything was cleared up, but it really wasn't. By the end of the quest, you at least know that pretty much everything you went through was false, but you don't know what happened in the actual reality during the time you were in the fake one. Anyway, that aside, the quest has other issues. One of them I mentioned before. Mia's story just fails at being emotional. She's an NPC side character that barely talks, and on top of that, my head is stuck trying to figure out what is going on in the quest. How am I supposed to feel anything? And then, another really dumb thing here is that Cartesia saw that there was trouble in Septimon and wanted to help. Up until there, no issues. But why in the world would she decide to go alone instead of calling for help? She knows Robert and Cantarella, the least she could have done is left a message behind saying that she was headed there. I thought that by the end of 2.2 Cartesia had learned to trust Rover. And speaking of trusting Rover, another thing I dislike is how easily Luba trusts Rover. Yeah, I understand that the explanation is that she trusts them because they're an outsider, which means they're uninvolved with the internal conflicts of Septimont. But come on, trusting someone to guide them through the place and trusting them enough to fight alongside them are two very different things. Next, let's talk about Cristoforo, more specifically about his powers, because they're easily some of the dumbest I've ever seen. You can't just give one of the main villains the power to literally rewrite reality. First off, because it makes everything really confusing, and secondly, because it completely destroys the power levels. And finally, I want to say that this quest was supposed to be the introduction to Septimont, and I don't think it did a good job of it. Simply because 2.0 introduced us to all the characters properly, and here the quest was pretty much all focused on Luba and Cartesia. So yeah, overall, I'd say this quest is my least favorite of Rinascita. Luckily, the next patch in this list is version 2.5. Rejoice, because 2.5 is finally a good story quest. My favorite quest in the game, in fact. Yes, it has a bunch of long filler gameplay sections, but other than that, I'd say this version delivers. Well, it delivered until I found out 2 weeks after playing it that Frolova was alive, but we'll talk about that at the end of this. First, let's focus on everything the story does right. I shouldn't be praising track questions and confusing, but looking at 2.2 and 2.4, I think it's worth saying that this one is easy to understand. Fenrico's boss fight and his ending were not the best, but overall it was a satisfying conclusion to his character. But now, let's talk about what makes this quest special. Frolova's backstory is actually pretty good. We see the tragedy that caused her to join the Fraxidos, and we realize that she had actually met Rover before the game even began. And that's where her animosity towards the Rover comes from, because they forgot about her and the promise they made. This is the best part of the quest, when you realize the similarities between Rover and Frolova, and she herself starts pointing out Rover's hypocrisy. Who are they to say that Frolova's actions are wrong? By joining the Fraxidos, she has hurt many people to achieve her goal of reviving the entire village. But how is that any different from what Rover is doing? How many people has the Rover hurt by erasing their memories again and again, with the goal of saving the planet? And she knows better than anyone, because she herself has been hurt by Rover when they forgot about their promise. This is what I love to see in a video game story. Characters that are complex and debates about morality. Frolova might appear to hate Rover, but she's more complex than that. Though they might have forgotten about her promise, she still remembers about it, and she can bring herself to fully hate the one person who took an interest in her performance. You can see this in the way she talks to Rover, and also in that she keeps helping them indirectly. Like in 2.4 when she gave them the book. But at the end of the quest, you see the tragedy unfold before your eyes. Even though Rover and Frolova don't truly hate each other, the way things have turned out has forced them to fight. And the following cutscene might just be the most beautiful in the game. It doesn't have any huge VFX, crazy animations or insane camera work. But that's because it doesn't need to be grandiose and it doesn't want to be. It is as unceremonious as possible to show the player how mundane death is. How it comes in an instant and goes away just as fast. And the best part about the cutscene is that it barely has any dialogue, because it doesn't need it. It conveys everything it wants without the need for words. Frolova and Rover's sadness, and how little Cristoforo cares about the other members of the Fraxidos. How death can come when you least expect it, just like how Frolova's village was wiped out in an instant. And the bittersweet feelings at the end, when Frolova is finally reunited in death with the people from her past she missed so dearly. The cutscene in the game that manages to convey the most emotions is the one with the least amount of words. Only music and visuals were needed. And the small segment after the cutscene is also fantastic. Frolova's final message is great, but the ending might be even better. Seeing both Frolova and Rover moving in opposing directions, and then watching both of them looking back for a second without the other noticing, and with the music too, what a great song to end the story with. I really cannot understand how this quest exists in this game. They must have hired a different writer for this one. The jumping quality of the actual writing compared to the other versions is astounding. It's easily the best quest in the game, and it's not even remotely close. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that now I have to address the elephant in the room. Because 2 weeks after I finished the quest, the 2.7 trailer came out. And in there, it was revealed that Frolova was actually still alive, which massively lowers my score of the quest. Don't get me wrong, I still think it's easily the best version in the game, and I still like it, but I don't love it anymore, because now everything the quest conveyed about death is pretty much invalid. In fact, a lot of things about the quest stop making sense, mostly Frolova's emotions during that ending. They lose their significance now that we know she knew that she wasn't really dying. During that whole ending, they really wanted us to believe that Frolova was dead, and they wanted us to feel sad about it, and now it just feels cheap. I don't get why gacha games are so scared of killing off playable characters, but if they don't want to kill them, then just don't. Don't lie to me like this. Finally, I'm going to address something outside the game, because I know that right now all the WuWa fans are writing a comment saying that I'm dumb, and that it was clear already in version 2.5 that she wasn't dead. First off, the quest clearly wants you to believe that she's dead. Secondly, the only places where you can learn that she's not dead are either on a text that's not even in the game, or in a dialogue inside the game that's totally missable. When I finished the quest, I saw the rewards pop up on my screen, and then moved on. I didn't find that dialogue. And I don't believe I'm alone in this. In fact, I believe I'm part of the majority here. And my third and final point here is that you also led me to the belief that she was dead. I remember clearly how when 2.5 came out, social media was filled with people praising the game for having the courage to kill a playable character. So naturally, when I played the quest myself, I believed she was dead. But after the 2.7 trailer released, I saw how every single one of those same people started calling those who didn't like that Frolova was alive dumb. Anyway, I'm not going to talk anymore about the community. This video is about the game, and not the players. I just want you to admit that this quest could have been fantastic, and that they ruined it by not keeping Frolova dead. It's now only good when it could have been great. Now, let's move on to version 2.6. This version is sort of okay, not really good, but not too bad. It was easy enough to understand for the most part, but just like most other quests, the story is carried by the presentation rather than the writing. This one didn't have too much filler. I've seen people complain about Murmur's Town, but the section looked totally fine to me. I don't know what the issue is. The one surprise from the quest was Ovidius. The first time you meet him, you expect him to be the classic character you're supposed to hate, but he ended up being quite different, and a bit complex too, which is really nice. Anyway, though before I said the quest is easy to understand, there is one thing that could have been handled way better. Until I started part 2 of the quest, I had no idea Yuno died at the end of part 1. The cutscene just shows her shooting an arrow. I really don't get how I was supposed to infer from that moment that she sacrificed herself. Next, the thing I hated the most from the whole quest is how Augusta kept getting whispers from the Threnodian and didn't mention them to anyone until the very end. It makes no sense at all. Why not tell to her friend Yuno about them? And Yuno isn't any better, considering she sacrificed herself without telling her about it. I thought they were supposed to trust each other, but their actions tell the opposite. Moving on, the main thing of the quest seems to be destiny and the future. A classic JRPG theme, one that we all love, at least when it's executed right. At the end of the quest, Augusta decides to fight Rover in an attempt to defy destiny. But I don't understand why that was necessary at all. The mural showed only one warrior fighting the Dark Tide. Aren't they already defying destiny simply by both of them being there? Why can't they both fight the Dark Tide together? She says that she's fighting Rover to make them, the one you can predict, the hero of heroes in order to follow what's on the mural. Can they just not ignore the mural? Maybe I'm just dumb, but I feel like they made this more confusing than it needed to be. Anyway, even still, I'd say overall part 1 of the version was fine. Part 2 on the other hand, I didn't really enjoy. The theme is the same, except this time the quest is focused only on Yuno. So much so that it feels more like a companion quest than a story quest. It's just Yuno's backstory stretched out into a 3-hour ordeal just for her to say at the end that she will fight to defy fate, which is something that was already said in part 1, and a conclusion that shouldn't have taken her so long to reach. And the ending might just be the worst, simply because nobody except Rover remembers her, meaning her whole relationship with Augusta is now gone, and I already said before how much this game lacks interactions between characters. I really don't have anything else to say about part 2. That whole section could have happened off camera and we wouldn't have lost anything of value. Overall, the first half was okay and the second half was pretty bad. Next, we have the final patch of Lunasita, version 2.7. 2.7 is actually a pretty good patch, only because it has a good ending. Overall, I'd say the quest is mid. but because they didn't fumble the ending, and I know how hard it is to write a satisfying one, I gotta give them extra points. They brought everyone together, the final boss was really cool, and the epilogue was just the right length. A pretty good farewell to Rinasita. The main thing I loved about the quest was Cabrena. Let me tell you, she's the protagonist this game desperately needs. Throughout the whole quest, and honestly throughout all of Rinasita, Rover's performance was just beautiful, especially when talking through Cristoforo and after that in the grey area with the tombs. Meanwhile, Galbrana was out here guarding the entire quest from start to finish. First off, while she still suffers from the same doesn't feel like a human issue, her BA tried her hardest to make her sound cool, and I think she did a great job. Second, her whole backstory is amazing. A character that decided to merge with the Dark Tide and eat Tacet Discords in order to fight with both of them. I mean, how could you not like her? Any character in a game that with themes of both light and darkness together is always fantastic. Third, she accomplishes way more in the story than any other character. She sets the plan in motion by killing Cartesia, kills countless Tacet Discords, she solos the leader of the Fraxidos, saves Rover from the depths, and survives overclocking. And finally, all of that happens while she acts as cool and awesome as possible. She's aggressive, sassy and witty, full of charisma. She was the real protagonist of the quest, and the saddest thing here is that we're still stuck playing Rover, who has less personality than a mannequin in comparison. Anyway, let's now talk about the quest issues. Starting with a new style of cutscene that they added, which I kinda like, but it really needs some work. The lip sync is really bad, and the FPS are so low you can notice it. And the dialogue choices appear and disappear way too fast for you to read them and pick one. I don't get why they felt the need to add this, the old dialogues look fine to me. Next, while there are a lot of characters in the quest, the issue of them not interacting with each other is still not fully fixed. They still pretty much only talk to Rover, and I also feel like they went too hard on the whole Avengers theme. You didn't need to show everyone from the Black Shores too, especially when their appearance was not good at all. Shorekeeper didn't even speak, and a few other characters just said lines taken straight from their combat lines. Finally, I have to say that I didn't really get the Sentinel's words about him wanting to guide humanity and being just as bad as the Threnodian. The Threnodian is out here trying to destroy civilization and mind-controlling people, while the Sentinel just gave him that Genesis Nexus and then, as far as I know, left them pretty much alone. So I really don't understand why the Sentinel would say that they're no different. That part was pretty dumb in my opinion. Anyway, that should be everything. It's funny because I still think the quest is mid, and it didn't really move me while playing it. Yet again, the story is more about style than substance. But even with that, overall I'd say the quest might very well be the best ending of the big gacha games. Like I said, it's hard to make a good ending, and they did a lot of things right here, so they deserve extra praise for it. And to be fair, I probably wasn't moved by the quest because after playing Cold Steel 4 and Endwalker, any other game trying to pull off an Avengers style ending just feels lackluster to me. But yeah, that's it for Rinasita. Well, I was going to move on to the next section, but I realized I was pretty negative. So I might as well talk about my top 3 favorite quests in the game to balance it out. My third favorite quest in the game is 2.7, and my favorite quest is 2.5. But I've already talked about those, so let's focus on my second favorite quest in the game. I am obviously talking about Cantarella's quest, though I want to keep an honorable mention to Anchor's quest. That one was also pretty good, but it got dethroned from the number 3 spot after version 2.7. Anyway, let's talk about what makes Cantarella's quest so great. The obvious thing to mention here is Cantarella herself, one of my favorite characters in the game. You look at her design and think she's the classic evil femme fatale with a poison theme, but then you play the story quest and realize she's actually not a bad person. Even better, she was meant to be the Sentinel Resonator and went through a second awakening and survived without the Rover's help. And on top of that, she has been working in the shadows to help Raguna all while resisting the Threnodian's whispers. Just off of feats alone, she's one of the best characters in the game, but it gets even better. Her story quest explains her backstory in more detail, the trials that she had to go through in order to become the head of the Visalia family. It also reveals that, even while suffering through those, she was still determined to save as many people as possible. I also want to quickly praise her BA. If we ignore the voice direction and writing issues, her performance might just be one of the best in the game. It's a pretty short quest that focuses entirely on her, but the way the quest unfolds and how you learn of the tragic past of the Visalia family is so well written that I have to put this as my second favorite quest in the game. Well, also because there's not really much competition. But let's not talk about that and focus on the fact that the quest is awesome. Also, the next section is gameplay, which is a lot more positive than this one. Let's start by talking about the combat. Though it has its fair share of issues, I'm inclined to say that it's the best combat of the big 3 gacha games, or at least the most fun. It's very similar to Genshin in a way, but it's the small differences that make it quite a bit better. There's the obvious stuff like animations and VFX being cooler, but I don't think that has as big of an impact as people think it does. To me, there's 3 things in particular that make a massive difference. First, it's the concerto system. The energy bar that all characters have that, when full, lets them perform an outro skill when being switched out and an intro skill when being switched in. It seems like such a small thing, right? I mean, it doesn't exist in Genshin, and you still swap out characters there. And even if it didn't exist here, you would still swap out characters. But it's great because now you have an extra resource to keep track of across all characters. But most importantly, the skills keep the momentum of the fight going. In Genshin, swapping out a character is just a moment. But it's a moment where the fight stops. nothing is happening. That feeling of an action game of keeping a combo going is lost, and it also feels weird and unrealistic, characters just pop in and out. Here in WuWa, the fight doesn't stop because you switched out. If anything, it gets more intense because now you have two characters on the screen doing their intro and outro skills, and it's a lot more realistic than having characters just disappear. Second, it's the extra buttons that characters have. Some of the newer characters have multiple forms, but even without counting that, every single character in the game has the forte system, which usually changes one of their attacks. And all characters have access to echoes too, that's another button added. Compared to Genshin where most skills only have a skill and a burst, here in WuWa there's a lot more actions that you can do in combat. I don't think I need to explain why having more buttons in an action game is better. It makes the game feel more complex and better to play overall. But it's not just that characters have extra buttons that helps with that, but it's also that you are incentivized to use their full kit. 90% of supports in Genshin play like this: E, then Q, then swap out. Here in WuWa, I was surprised to learn that a lot of support characters actually want to weave in basic attacks, and some of them even include jumps and heavy attacks in their best rotations. It is so nice that sub DPSs and healers get more active time in combat. In Genshin, it feels bad when a character you like is revealed to be a support, because that means you don't get to see them on your screen that often in combat. Here in WuWa, even healers like Shorekeeper and Berina have complex rotations and plenty of time in the spotlight. But how come you have so much time in team rotations to perform these extra attacks? Well, that leads me to reason number 3 why the combat feels so much better. Third, it's that there's only 3 characters in the team. Your first thought might be that it's a bad thing to have less characters, but it's actually way better, and let me explain why. The reason characters in WuWa can get away with having more skills and even introducing normal and heavy attacks into rotations is this. With only 3 characters, if the units had the same amount of buttons as the ones in Genshin, rotations would be way shorter. But with the extra buttons and attacks, the average rotation time ends up being about the same, with the difference that because each unit in the team performs more actions, they feel more important and way better to play. Gameplay-wise, that's about it, but I have to add that having only 3 characters also helps outside of combat. It means that to make a full premium team you have to pull for and build one less unit, and that's a lot of gems saved there, which makes the gacha system better than Genshin. But I'll talk about this specifically in the gacha section. Unfortunately, the combat system does have its flaws too. Just playing the story I didn't notice them because the combats there are easy, but once I tried the hologram fights the issues became apparent. The hitboxes and attack timings of many enemies are not well thought out, and this is most noticeable on the large bosses. I also take issue with the parry system, I just don't think it fits the game. In actual action games, bosses have a clear period of time when they can attack, and once it ends, you can attack them until they break out. The parry is there so if you're skilled enough, you can block their attacks and start attacking them faster than if you were to wait for them to stop. This give and take is just not present in WuWa. Enemies will just keep attacking you and power through most of your attacks. And the parry is mostly to lower their break, it doesn't just stun them immediately most of the time. I also take issue with the fact that the parry action is bound to left click, the same button used to attack, because with most characters you want to keep using normal attacks to get in a bit more damage, which means that most times I end up missing the parries. Yes, skill issue, I know, but you have to agree that it would be nice to be able to have the parry action on a different button. There's also a small problem with the visibility of combat. Characters all have these crazy and huge visual effects that are very flashy, but so do some enemies, and when you combine both, it can sometimes be really hard to see what's going on. In another game it might not be an issue, but here in WuWa, dodging is pretty important, and it can be difficult to get the timing down when you can barely see the enemy itself. The last issue I have with the combat is that enemies move too much. They also have the problem that I've dubbed the Genshin backstep, where enemies tend to run away from you or keep their distance. But here enemies just move a ton. Bosses like the Inferno Rider and the False Sovereign just run laps around the whole arena. It's crazy. It's true that characters here are also more mobile compared to Genshin, but I don't think they are fast enough to make this not an issue. If my rotation gets interrupted because I get hit, sure, but when my combo stops because the boss decided to teleport a mile away, that feels awful. That's all about the combat, and honestly most of the gameplay here is combat, so there's not much more to say. I do want to praise one more thing here though, and it's funny because it's a small thing, but it might be my favorite part of the game. If you've seen my YouTube shorts, then you probably know what I'm talking about. It's the wings. I'm going to ignore the fact that they were only introduced in Renacita and that they're going to disable them on the next region. Let's instead focus on the positives here because, like I said, they might just be the best thing here and what separates WuWa from other open world gacha games. They make exploration 1,000 times more fun. They allow the developers to make maps with a lot more verticality, and you can see the scale of the world much better from up high. And they are really fast, which is great because when I explore I want to spend more time in combat or doing puzzles or quests than just walking to the next place. And it's a small detail, but I love how from flat ground with some characters you can get just enough height to start flying if you jump, do a basic attack and cancel it into an air dash. It makes me feel like I'm good at the game, even when I suck at it. There's something about the character designs that doesn't quite click with me. I'm not a big fan of any of them. But I really don't hate them either, they're just okay, I guess. I think part of why I feel this is the art style. Yes, it does make the game seem less childish compared to Genshin, but it's also closer to just that generic anime style, which makes characters stand out less. But for a gacha game, character design is really important, because it's what determines if you want to pull for a character or not. And to be honest, if I had been playing since 1.0, I don't think I would have been excited to pull for any of the characters. Maybe a bit for Changli and Shorekeeper, but that's about it. Anyway, I'm not really an artist, and whether or not you like the characters is more of a subjective thing, so I'm not going to hate too much. But I stand my ground that I think they could be better. This is a bit of a weird complaint, but I think character kits are getting a bit too complicated to understand. Playing the actual unit once you understand how it works is fine, but getting there is the problem. This isn't so much an issue for the older characters, but the newer ones definitely have way too many words in their descriptions. I pulled for Augusta, and I tried to figure out how her abilities worked and what the best rotation was, and after a long while I just had to give up and check out guide. I do like that characters are a lot more complex compared to other gacha games, but I don't think that's a valid excuse to ignore clarity in their kit descriptions. And yes, I did play Augusta's trial, but the trials just walk you through their abilities one by one without much detail. It is up to you to figure out the intricacies and the rotation of the character, and sometimes that can be really hard. I think they should just teach basic rotations on the character trials. It's fine if they're not fully optimized, but at least it would be a starting point. A huge part of how much I like a character in a gacha game is their voice acting, and while I do love the different accents here, I think every VA is good, I'm sorry, but I haven't heard any performance that has moved me. I'd say the best performances here are Cantarella and Galbrena. I've seen many people praise Cartesia, but I only really like her combat lines. I didn't think her performance in 2.2 was anything to write home about. But I think this is more of an issue with the script though. It doesn't matter how good a BA is if what's written on the script is not up to par. Yet again, we see how the story being bad bleeds out and affects all other aspects of the game. Which is a shame, because I've heard these BAs in other games, and I know they can do amazing. But I've already complained enough about the story, so let's move on. Before moving on to the presentation, I'll say that usually here I'd include the top 3 of my favorite characters in the game and talk about them. But my top 3 are Galbrena, Cantarella, and Frollowa, and I feel like I've already talked enough about those when I went through their quest in the story section. I mostly value story over gameplay when ranking this, and to me these 3 characters are the better written ones. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Let's go to the next section. Alright, this section includes how the game looks and how it feels to play. Luckily, this is the one aspect where WuWa gets to shine. Let's start with the graphics, which are undoubtedly the best in the gacha game scene right now. I'm not even playing with the best possible settings, but even with that, the game looks as good or even better than many recent JRPGs. This is most noticeable on the environments, and especially the ones from the latest versions. Septimond and the Sanguis Plateaus both look incredible, especially when playing with their new ultra settings. A lot of games nowadays like Astrobot opt to show their technical prowess to physics and particles instead of just better visuals, and I have to say I'm in favor of this. Seeing the leaves in WuWa fly away when attacking is great. Unfortunately, the ultra settings are extremely limited, and for no good reason. I don't believe you need a 4080 to be able to play smoothly at that quality, so I really hope they tone down these requirements. But still, even without ultra settings, there's no doubt that the game looks great. And as a game dev, I have to give them props for choosing to work with Unreal 4 instead of Unreal 5. Seeing how badly games with Unreal 5 are performing and how much devs hate that engine, it's clear now that they made the best choice. But good graphics usually come at a cost, and it's undeniable that WuWa has higher requirements than games like Genshin and Star Rail. I've also heard many people complain about performance issues, both in PC and in mobile, and especially in the latest areas. I personally haven't had any of those issues. If anything, I've been surprised by how well the game runs, even while flying at high speeds. I don't think I've even seen a single stutter in my entire time playing the game, at least until version 2.7. I did feel a drop in performance with that patch, but considering that the game ran fine for the whole previous version, I'm not going to criticize it too much. I'm going to go against the majority here and say that the game's performance is totally fine. It could obviously be improved, but that's always the case with any video game. I think people just expect too much out of phones and old PCs. This game is open world and has incredible graphics. You cannot expect it to run perfectly unless you have a decently good machine. I feel like it goes without saying, but the visuals, sound effects and animations are top notch too. Again, because there's one less character on the team, I feel like they made an extra effort to make sure that every unit shined in the visual department on every single one of their abilities. It's also worthy of praise that they're keeping such quality when they have to work so much more on characters compared to a game like Genshin, because units here have more actions they can execute. And about the animations, what I love is just how much more mobile characters feel because of them. Carlotta C shoots her up in the air, and so does Augustas. Cantarella actually floats and moves around like she's swimming while attacking. Some characters even change their whole movement while in a form, like Amelia. These make the combat feel a lot more fluid, and you can get a lot fancier with your movement. And one last thing that people might gloss over is the camera work. Even while using all of these crazy animations, it is always where you need it to be, and it all actually moves to make the attacks feel better. The camera plays a huge part in the game feel, and it is something that the Genshin devs desperately need to understand. There's barely any camera work in combat in that game. Here, it's subtle, but you can clearly see that there is some. There's a small zoom out when using Carlotta Z, so you can see the whole trajectory of the attack. There's also one when using Shorekeeper's intro, so you can see the huge wings. And many others that I won't get into right now, or else we would be here all day. Listen, I love good graphics as much as the next person, but to be honest, I don't really care too much about them. I'm used to playing old games, so bad graphics are not an issue for me. But what I do care about are animations, and again I'm glad to report WuWa has the crown here. Characters in Genshin and Star Rail only have like 2 poses in a dialogue, either standing still or placing their hand on their chest. Don't even think about having them move or do any meaningful action while talking, it's just impossible. Or if they do, it will be with a reused animation. And don't even get me started on the lack of camera work. But here, characters can talk and move. They do a few different gestures. The camera actually moves around and tries to do a bit of more than just jump cuts. The dialogues are not the best I've ever seen, not even close. But compared to how static the competition is, they sure are a lot better. Especially on the latest versions, they've been improving a lot lately. Yes, they did cheat a bit on version 2.7 because a few of the dialogues were actually pre-rendered. But hey, if it means we can have better animations, I'm not complaining. I'm going to end this section with a small issue, but it pissed me off quite a bit, so I have to mention it. The cooling in this game is way too aggressive, to the point where you can definitely see it and it kinda ruins the experience. If you don't know, I'm talking about the technique where objects that you can see stop being rendered to help with performance. Except here, they have configured it in a way that even if you're just turning your camera slowly, you'll notice the objects appearing and disappearing. It is especially bad in interiors. Areas like the vault and the Renacita towers look really bad because of this. It shouldn't be too hard to fix, so I don't get how they haven't changed it yet. I hope more people complain about it so they get the message. Now let's go over the gacha system. And like in other videos, this section doesn't only include the actual pulling mechanics, but also events and endgame modes. But let's start on pulling first, with the issue that plagues the big gacha games, 50-50. I feel like I've said this 1,000 times already, but the point of a PT system is to guarantee that you get the unit that you want in a determined amount of pulls. Considering there is a 50% chance to get a character and that soft PT exists, it's safe to say the system is not doing what it's supposed to. Anyway, if we look at the numbers, then you can see that PT is 10 pulls less on WuWa compared to say Genshin or Star Rail. This is objectively a good thing, but I will say that I don't know what the soft PT probabilities are here, and I personally feel that I hit soft PT more often on those two games compared to WuWa. Might just be a me thing though. Here's the big difference between WuWa and the other big gacha games. The weapons are guaranteed here. This is an undeniable upgrade, but as most things in life, it does come with its caveats. Weapons here are closer in power level to Star Rail than Genshin, meaning more often than not, you need to pull for the weapon to have the characters at the power level you want. Yes, not every weapon is a massive upgrade, but when the weapon for one of the latest characters, is a 42% upgrade over the standard weapon, that feels like a bit too much. Also, 4-star weapons are a lot weaker here. I do understand that this is because you can get 5-star weapons more easily from the standard banner, but it's not as easy as people make it out to be. I played multiple hours daily for over a month, and I don't have a single standard banner weapon other than the one they give you for free. Obviously, if you've been playing for a while or since release, you'll probably have quite a few, but you can't really claim that they're giving this away easily. You need to play for a bit before you can get them. And I'm going to say the same thing I said for the other big gacha games. Having to pull for both characters and their weapons is stupid. Pretty much every gacha game before Genshin had only characters, as it should be. But since Genshin came out and it exploded, the other developers realized they could rinse players for even more of their money. Even if the weapons are guaranteed, it's still a bad practice, and the more we accept it, the more they'll get away with in the future. Today they make us pull for characters and weapons. Give it a few more years, and we'll be pulling for those two and something else as well. Another difference here compared to the big gacha games is the 2 beginner banners. All new players have access to 2 banners that let you choose one character and one weapon from the one released before version 2.0. Well, you can choose, but anyone with a brain will pick Shorekeeper and her weapon. And that's the issue with these 2 banners, you're pulling for a support character. And because the banner is still subjected to 50-50 for some reason, it can take quite a few pulls to get the character. Pulls that you're not using on another character, like a DPS one. I did manage to win the 50-50 on Shorekeeper, but even with that I needed a lot more gems to pull for a DPS character, which at the time when I joined was Augusta. Meaning in total, it took me 4 weeks from joining the game until I had an actual DPS character. Now, don't get me wrong, these 2 banners are undeniably great. I mean, any new player has access to the best character in the game and their weapon. The problem comes from the fact that by pulling for them, you're kinda stuck with either Rover or a standard banner character as your DPS. And that affects how the player feels about the combat. Because let's be honest, those old characters don't feel as nice to play as the newer ones. They don't look nearly as cool, and most importantly, they're not nearly as strong. And it's not like you're stuck for a small time. Like I said, it took me 4 weeks to get Augusta, and that's while playing a lot and winning both 50-50s. Now imagine if I had lost any of them, or even worse, both. I really like these 2 banners, but I believe they need to improve them just a bit more to make sure new players have a better experience. At the very least, remove the 50-50 from the starter character banner. Here's the last thing about the gacha system. Like I already mentioned in the gameplay section, teams only have 3 characters instead of the 4 used by Genshin and Star Rail. That's 1 less character that you need to build. But it gets even better because with the starter banner you are guaranteed Shorekeeper, and from the beginner banner you can get Verina. As of me writing this part of the script, these 2 characters are best in slot for a lot of teams in the game. Verina not so much anymore, but she's still a pretty good option, which means that realistically, you only have to build 2 more characters to have a full team. But as with everything good in life, there's a caveat. The main endgame mode, Tower of Adversity, requires 3 teams instead of the 2 teams that Genshin and Star Rail require. Because it's only one of the endgame modes, I'm still willing to say that, considering every single difference, overall WuWa's gacha system is the best of the main gacha games. I don't have much to say about the events that I haven't already said about Genshin and Star Rail's events. It seems that these gacha games are unable to release anything fun or meaningful. Again, most events here are just dumb mini games that drag on for way too long. You have the tower defense, the hunt puzzle, the follow idle game, the fishing event, the card game event. And I have to say, even the ones about combat are boring. The cube event and the dream event are just regular combat, but you can have an extra button to press. And I'm not even going to talk about the flying ones where you don't even have to press a single button. I'd say maybe the best one here was Chacona's event, but that was just a character quest disguised as an event for some reason. So yeah, overall I'm not a big fan of the events here, but to be fair, all the big gacha games suck at making this for some reason. Finally, there's the endgame modes, and unfortunately I cannot talk too much about them because I haven't played their highest difficulties yet. I was mostly focused on the story for my playthrough. I can say that I appreciate that they are different though. Tower is clearly more single target focused, while Wuthering Waves is purely AoE. And that gives more characters a chance to at least be good in one of the 2 modes. I wish I could say more, but because you need 9 full characters at max level and properly built to even attempt the tower, I couldn't even try the higher levels. But having tried the middle levels, I'd say the endgame is just similar to pretty much all the other big gacha games. Nothing to write home about, but it gets the job done. As usual, this is the section where I talk about all the small details that don't really fit into any other category. Some are positive and some are negative, but none of them really make or break the game. Anyway, let's start. 1. Most holograms are dumb. Combine what I said about the enemies having bad hitboxes, moving a lot and having super armor with the fact that holograms steal almost your entire health bar in one strike, and it's not hard to see why I hate them. Yes, I know there's people that can solo them, and no, I don't care. Just because some people are good at the game doesn't make these bosses any less dumb. 2. I love that the treasure compass here shows every single chest and challenge in an area. Way better than having to use it every time after opening a chest. Looking at you, Genshin. 3. It's true that shop pulls reset less often than in Genshin and Star Rail, but you also get a lot more. I also like that some of them are weapon pulls. It makes it so that eventually you can get a 5-star weapon without even spending any gems. 4. I like the extra rewards you get from reaching certain exploration milestones. Exploration is easily the best aspect of the game with the wings, so more incentives are always nice. 5. I don't get why the targeting button can't be rebinded to another key. Nobody likes using the middle mouse button. Luckily, I didn't have any issues with the camera in combat, but I'm sure I could have had none if they just let me put this action on a key I could actually use. 6. I don't get why every event is permanent except 1.2. I was extremely lost at the beginning of Seshi's quest, and also during the anniversary event with Kalcharo's scene. Every other event is available for new players, and I don't see what would impede them from adding this one too. 7. When Abby appeared at the end of 1.0, I was really scared I would have to suffer another Paimon. I'm glad to report that Abby is miles better. He only speaks when necessary, and his voice doesn't hurt my ears. A massive improvement, and one that I'm very grateful for. 8. I don't like how I couldn't farm materials for Augusta when I pulled for her until I beat the whole story. For someone who had just started the game, it took me a long while until I was able to upgrade her. It doesn't matter if you give early access to the boss when the other materials aren't accessible, so just make those available earlier somehow. 9. The fact that in some Rinascita quests they keep forcing me to play Arrow Rover is really bad. I don't get why they couldn't just do the same thing they did in the Cartefia boss fight and let us fight with 2 or 3 Rover elements at the same time, instead of forcing us to play with a healer. 10. Please let me mute the game while I'm in another window. It's really annoying to try to do other stuff while the sounds are still playing. 11. I ended up doing all of the exploration quests because I thought at least some would be important or cool. But to be honest, as of writing this script, I can't even remember any of them. I'm not asking for insane quality on side content, but there's a few world quests in Genshin that are memorable. I can say the same here. 12. There's only one event I didn't do, and it's the Dreaming Deep event. There are minigames in gacha games that are so incredibly bad, long, and boring that they can cause people to quit the game. It happened to me in Zenless Zone Zero with their Arpeggio event, and Dreaming Deep felt like it was going to do the same to me after playing through the first stage. If you think the event is great, good for you, but I'm afraid I can't really comment on it. 13. I don't understand why the chest compass will show you every single chest without breaking, but the sun and casket marker only shows you one of them and it breaks. Just make it the same as the compass. I don't want to check the interactive map. 14. Is it just me, or is the way Septimont is built really weird? You have a bunch of monsters immediately below the high part of the city, but there's also people living down there, and for some reason they didn't try to fix the flooding of the area? I mean, I like the concept behind the area, but the execution just seems a bit weird to me. 15. I didn't mention this when talking about 2.7 because it's not really part of the story, but I really enjoyed the first person segment of it. I just really wish that they actually gave you more freedom. I don't know why they feel the need to keep holding our hands. But the concept was really cool and I appreciated they tried something different. 16. Even though the music in this game doesn't really move me, I appreciate that they add vocal tracks every now and then. I don't get why Genshin is so reluctant to add music with actual singing when these songs tend to be the best and most memorable in any game. 17. Completing the databank to increase your level would have been fun. if not for the fact that the menus are poorly thought out. The best way to see which ones you're missing is from the databank, but the only way you can track them is from the book menu. It would be nice if there was a better way to do this, because raising the databank level is really important. 18. I don't get why on the gadget wheel we only have one spot for items. 99% of the time this isn't an issue, but when doing the picture event you need to swap between the stone to track the next picture and the camera to actually take it. It's also annoying that you need to use the middle mouse button, that should be changed too. 19. I don't know if I've said this already, but the game suffers from the throw 50 voice lines for a 5-meter walk issue. There's nothing I hate more than losing out on information because the developers thought players would wait for the voice lines instead of just walking to the next objective directly. Nobody does that. Either make the walk longer or use less voice lines. 20. I haven't failed any quick time events, but I've heard that nothing happens if you miss any of them. Would it be so hard to make it so you can actually lose if you miss them and take you back to the start of the fight if you do? Just like every other game with quick time events does. 21. Big props for adding animations when pulling a character. It just adds so much more to the gacha experience. This should be a mandatory thing to have on all gacha games. Well, that should be everything, but I actually have a few more things I want to say. First is the context of why I decided to play the game. After the first Not Cry live stream from Genshin, I was very upset at the game and I decided to try WuWa in hopes I could replace Genshin with it. Even with me being angry at Genshin and wanting this game to be better, I was very disappointed while playing it. The thing that I care about most in a game is the story, how well it's written and how the characters inside it act and evolve. And the writing here is just overall not good. The only outlier would be Frollowa's quest, and even that one is only good instead of great because I didn't have the courage to kill a playable character. Also, let's not forget that I've only talked about Rinasita here. If I also went through the Huanglong story, my review would have been even more negative. Here's my message to the WuWa community: please stop hyping up the story on social media. You're doing the game a disservice, because people start playing the game expecting incredible writing, and when their expectations aren't met, then they feel incredibly disappointed with the game. I don't think my review of the story would have been as harsh if not for the fact that anytime I looked up or saw people's reactions to any Rinasita quest, they were overwhelmingly good. If I play a quest and I think it's bad while you think it's good, no problem. But when you say that it's the best story in a gacha history and a masterpiece, then I get angry, and without even wanting it, I end up being more harsh when writing the review. And not only are you ruining people's expectations, but there's another problem here. How do you expect this story to improve if you keep saying that every quest is amazing? Unless you actually start being somewhat objective and letting the developers know what the problems are, the story is going to stay mediocre forever. Listen, if you want to hype up the game, there's literally 1,000 other aspects you can praise. The combat is great, the gacha is a lot more generous than Hoyoverse's, the graphics and environments are incredible. There's plenty of features that you can celebrate on social media. Just please, for the sake of the game's future, you need to start being more willing to critique the story and the writing. Because let me tell you something, Genshin's story didn't have a single good quest until halfway through Sumeru when Jet's World Quest came out. It took them a long while to start writing properly, but once they did, more and more versions started being good. And now, in Not Cry, I'd say the entire story so far has been great. But that improvement happened because a lot of people criticize the story. WuWa has already released one good quest in nearly half the amount of time. That's a way better pace than Genshin. Frollowa's quest proves that they know how to write and that they can improve the story 1,000 times more. But again, that will never happen if everyone just keeps mindlessly saying that the story is a masterpiece when it isn't. And hey, while I'm talking about the community, I might as well chime in on the whole debate of which gacha game is better, Genshin or WuWa. First off, let's not forget that video games might just be the most subjective form of art. We can try all we want to be objective, but we all value different aspects of the game in different ways. I personally prefer Genshin, but that's because I value story over gameplay and Genshin's story to me just seems better. Someone else who values gameplay more would probably say that WuWa is the better game, and that's fine. Even if someone's told me that they prefer WuWa's story, I wouldn't be mad. I already said this in one of my shorts. When comparing these games that are similar in genre and quality, the only wrong take you can have is saying that one is objectively better than the other. Because most of the time, that's just not true at all. I notice now that this video didn't end up as long as I expected. It's actually about the same length as my Everything I Dislike About Genshin video. I was expecting to have more to say about the game, but because I've only played for less than 2 months and the game isn't that big yet, I guess there's not much to say. And just so you know, I've probably missed plenty of stuff, as I tend to do when writing these scripts. Anyway, I said before that I started playing WuWa in hopes of replacing Genshin. But yeah, after the Not Great versions and after playing WuWa to the end, I guess it should come as no surprise that I'm staying on Genshin. I might come back to WuWa to play the story again once I finish the 3.x questline, but we'll see. And with that, I take my leave. See you next time.